My business idea was stolen by my boss, but he didn't know he walked into my trap. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above my head as I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the computer screen. The office hummed with its usual mid-morning energy, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, and the occasional burst of laughter from the marketing department. It was a Tuesday like any other, or so everyone thought. What they didn't know was that today marked the beginning of the end for Andrew Caldwell, the man who had stolen not just an idea, but years of my life's work. It had started 2 years ago when I first joined Caldwell Enterprises as a junior product developer. Fresh out of graduate school with honors in business innovation, I had been brimming with ideas and ambition. The company, known for its cutting-edge technology solutions, seemed like the perfect place to launch my career. Little did I know that behind the sleek glass walls and polished conference rooms lurked a predator who would stop at nothing to climb the corporate ladder. Andrew Caldwell was everything you'd expect from a rising star in the tech industry, charismatic, articulate, and always impeccably dressed in his custom-tailored suits. At 38, he had already made a name for himself as an innovator, though anyone who worked closely with him knew better. Beneath his charming exterior lay a calculating mind that saw opportunities where others saw obstacles, regardless of whose ideas they might be. Our paths crossed during one of the company's quarterly brainstorming sessions. Tasked with developing new product lines, our team had gathered in the main conference room. As the junior member, I had prepared extensively, knowing this was my chance to prove myself. When my turn came, I presented my concept for ConnectFlow, an AI-powered networking platform designed to revolutionize professional connections by integrating emotional intelligence algorithms with traditional networking features. The room fell silent as I finished my presentation. Even through my nerves, I could feel the weight of their attention, see the spark of interest in their eyes. Andrew was the first to speak, his voice smooth as silk. "Brilliant," he said, leaning back in his chair with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "This has real potential. Let's schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss implementation details." That was the moment the trap began to form in my mind, though I didn't fully realize it at the time. Looking back, I can see how naive I was, how desperately I wanted to believe in the possibility of success within the system. I spent weeks refining the proposal, working late nights to incorporate feedback from Andrew and other senior members. Each meeting brought more suggestions, more enhancements, that somehow aligned perfectly with what I now recognize were his long-term strategic goals. The change in Andrew's behavior was subtle at first. Meetings became less frequent, his enthusiasm more measured. Then came the day when he called me into his office, closing the door behind us with a gravity that sent a chill down my spine. "We've decided to put ConnectFlow on hold," he announced, avoiding eye contact as he shuffled papers on his desk. "Senior management doesn't think it's viable right now." Something in his tone, the way his fingers trembled slightly against the edge of his desk, told me there was more to the story. But it wasn't until 3 months later, when I attended a major tech conference, that the truth hit me like a freight train. There on the main stage, stood Andrew Caldwell, presenting NetLink, a product that was ConnectFlow in everything but name. The audience erupted in applause as he described features I had spent countless nights developing, using language lifted directly from my presentations. As I watched him bask in the spotlight, something inside me shifted. The initial shock gave way to anger, then to clarity. Andrew thought he had won, that he had successfully taken what wasn't his and gotten away with it. What he didn't know was that he had walked straight into the most elaborate trap I could devise. Every detail of ConnectFlow, every meeting, every email exchange, I had documented everything. But revenge wasn't going to be as simple as exposing his theft. In the weeks following the conference, I continued to play the part of the loyal employee while quietly laying the groundwork for something much bigger. I knew that simply proving Andrew had stolen my idea wouldn't be enough. In the cutthroat world of corporate technology, intellectual property disputes often devolved into expensive legal battles that could drag on for years. No, I needed something more elegant, more devastating. Something that would make Andrew wish he had never heard of ConnectFlow. What Andrew failed to understand was that ConnectFlow was never just about creating a revolutionary networking platform. It was the foundation stone of a much larger vision, one that would fundamentally change how people approached professional relationships in the digital age. And as I watched him parading my work as his own, I realized that his greed had played perfectly into my hands. He had taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. The true brilliance of ConnectFlow lay not in its surface-level features, but in its underlying architecture, an intricate web of machine learning algorithms and emotional intelligence protocols that I had spent years developing. While Andrew celebrated his supposed victory, he had no idea that he was building his empire on a foundation designed to crumble at precisely the right moment. Every feature he implemented, every enhancement he added, only tightened the noose around his neck. Back in the present, as I stared at my computer screen, I allowed myself a small smile. The pieces were falling into place exactly as I had planned. Andrew's version of ConnectFlow, his precious netlink, was gaining traction faster than even he had anticipated. Major corporations were signing up, venture capitalists were lining up to invest, and industry publications were hailing him as a visionary leader. With each passing day, he was digging himself deeper into a hole he couldn't possibly comprehend. But the trap wasn't just about punishing Andrew for his theft. It was about proving a point, to him, to the industry, and to myself. In the corporate world, we often talk about innovation and disruption, but rarely do we address the dark underbelly of ambition that drives people like Andrew to steal rather than create. My plan wasn't just about justice, it was about reshaping the very landscape in which we operated. As I opened the confidential document on my screen, the one containing the detailed schematics of what I had secretly dubbed Phase 2, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The initial phase had been about setting the stage, about allowing Andrew to believe he had gotten away with his crime. Now, it was time to begin the real game. A game where every move he thought was taking him closer to success was actually leading him further into my carefully constructed maze. The morning light streaming through the office windows caught the edge of the prototype device sitting on my desk, the physical manifestation of what would become the final piece of my puzzle. To the untrained eye, it looked like just another piece of tech hardware, but beneath its sleek surface lay the culmination of everything I had learned about human behavior, corporate politics, and technological innovation. Andrew thought he had stolen an idea. What he didn't know was that he had stepped into a masterclass in strategic thinking. I had spent months cultivating relationships within the company, carefully positioning myself as both invisible and indispensable. To Andrew, I was just another cog in the machine, someone who would quietly accept her fate and continue working without complaint. To my colleagues, I was the reliable team player who always had their backs during crunch times. Neither group suspected that every interaction, every project I took on, was part of a larger design. The real genius of my plan lay in its dual nature. On one level, it was a classic case of turning an enemy's strength into their weakness. Andrew's insatiable hunger for recognition and advancement had made him vulnerable to exactly the kind of opportunity one had presented. He hadn't just stolen an idea, he had swallowed it whole, incorporating it so deeply into his own narrative that separating himself from it would be impossible. Every press release, every investor pitch, every public appearance tied him tighter to what he believed was his greatest achievement. But there was another layer to my strategy, one that even now I kept hidden from everyone, including those closest to me. During the months I had spent documenting Andrew's theft, I had simultaneously been developing what I privately called Project Echo. This wasn't merely about reclaiming my intellectual property or punishing Andrew for his actions. It was about creating a new paradigm in how technology companies approach innovation and ethics. Project Echo represented the next evolution of ConnectFlow's core technology, but with crucial modifications that Andrew's version lacked. While Netlink focused primarily on efficiency and data collection, my enhanced version incorporated advanced ethical AI protocols and decentralized security measures. These weren't just technical improvements, they were fundamental shifts in how such platforms interacted with users' personal and professional lives. The timing of my revenge was as carefully calculated as every other aspect of my plan. Andrew's rapid ascent had created ripples throughout the industry, drawing attention from competitors, regulators, and media outlets. Each new partnership he announced, each milestone he achieved, brought more scrutiny to his operation. Meanwhile, I had been quietly securing strategic alliances with key players who shared my vision for a more ethical approach to professional networking technology. One of the most satisfying aspects of my plan was how it exploited Andrew's own management style against him. His tendency to micromanage and take credit for others' work had created a culture of fear and resentment within the company. Many of my colleagues, frustrated by his behavior but afraid to speak up, had become valuable allies in my quest. They provided crucial insights into Netlink's development process, helped test Project Echo's features in secret, and occasionally fed misinformation to Andrew's inner circle. The physical prototype on my desk represented the culmination of these efforts. Unlike Netlink's centralized architecture, Project Echo utilized a distributed network structure that made it virtually impossible to control or shut down arbitrarily. More importantly, it incorporated a unique feature that would prove devastating to anyone attempting to operate without proper authorization, a self-regulating algorithm that could detect and respond to unethical usage patterns. As I ran my fingers along the device's smooth surface, I reflected on how far I had come since that first brainstorming session. What had started as a personal vendetta had evolved into something much larger. The corporate world was about to learn a valuable lesson about the dangers of short-sighted ambition and the importance of respecting intellectual property rights. Andrew Caldwell had unknowingly become the poster child for everything wrong with modern corporate culture. The irony was almost poetic. In his desperation to claim ConnectFlow as his own, Andrew had set himself up for the ultimate downfall. Every successful product launch, every glowing review, every new user signing up for Netlink brought him closer to the moment when Project Echo would reveal itself. And when that moment arrived, it wouldn't just be Andrew's career that crumbled, it would be everything he thought he understood about technology, business, and power. During those months of careful planning, I found myself constantly reminded of why I had fallen in love with technology in the first place. Growing up, I had always been fascinated by how machines could understand human emotions, how code could translate feelings into actionable insights. My mother used to joke that I was born speaking both English and Python, though back then I hadn't understood what that meant. All I knew was that when I played with my first computer at age 6, something clicked inside me, a realization that technology could bridge the gaps between people, not just connect them. This passion had driven me through sleepless nights in college, through countless internship rejections, through moments when I doubted whether I belonged in the male-dominated world of tech innovation. When I finally landed my position at Caldwell Enterprises, I thought I had found the perfect place to nurture this dream. The company's mission statement spoke of breaking barriers and creating meaningful connections, values that resonated deeply with my vision for ConnectFlow. How cruelly ironic that it would be within these very walls that I would witness the darkest side of corporate ambition. The emotional toll of watching Andrew parade my work as his own was unlike anything I had experienced before. Nights blurred into days as I wrestled with feelings of betrayal, anger, and self-doubt. There were moments when I questioned whether I should simply walk away, find another company where I could start fresh. But each time doubt crept in, I remembered why I had created ConnectFlow in the first place, to help people build genuine connections in an increasingly disconnected world. What kept me going wasn't just the desire for revenge or validation. It was the knowledge that Andrew's version of my idea was missing something crucial: soul. Netlink might have all the bells and whistles, but it lacked the deep understanding of human emotion that had been the foundation of my original concept. Where I had seen technology as a tool for empathy and connection, Andrew saw it as a means to an end, a way to boost his profile and pad his bank account. This fundamental difference in perspective became the cornerstone of Project Echo. While Andrew focused on adding features that impressed investors and journalists, I dedicated myself to enhancing the platform's ability to foster real, meaningful relationships. The emotional intelligence algorithms I had developed went beyond simple pattern recognition. They incorporated elements of psychological theory and social dynamics that most tech companies dismissed as too soft for serious consideration. Perhaps the most challenging aspect was maintaining my composure while witnessing Andrew's rise. At company meetings, I watched him receive standing ovations for implementing features I had originally proposed. During industry events, I saw colleagues congratulate him on innovations I had painstakingly researched and developed. Each smile, each handshake, each pat on the back felt like salt in an open wound. Yet through it all, I maintained my mask of professionalism, channeling my pain into fuel for Project Echo. There were nights when the weight of it all threatened to crush me. I would sit alone in my apartment, surrounded by prototypes and research papers, wondering if I was becoming the very thing I despised, consumed by ambition and revenge. But then I would remember the faces of early ConnectFlow testers, the stories they had shared about how the platform had helped them find mentors, secure jobs, and build networks that changed their lives. These memories reminded me that this fight wasn't just about me or Andrew, it was about protecting the integrity of an idea that had the potential to make a real difference in people's lives. As I worked on Project Echo, I began to understand that my journey wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about proving that technology could be both innovative and ethical, that success didn't have to come at the expense of others. Every line of code I wrote, every algorithm I refined, was infused with this belief. The emotional investment I had poured into ConnectFlow had transformed from personal attachment to something greater, a commitment to changing the very fabric of how people connected in the digital age. The realization hit me during one particularly grueling week of testing. As I observed Project Echo's algorithms interacting with real users, I noticed something remarkable. The platform wasn't just facilitating connections, it was helping people recognize and overcome their own biases, fears, and insecurities. Users reported feeling more confident in their professional interactions, more authentic in their communications, more willing to take risks that led to meaningful opportunities. This wasn't just technology, it was emotional alchemy, transforming anxiety into confidence, isolation into community, doubt into determination. In those quiet moments between coding sessions and strategy meetings, I found myself reflecting on the nature of traps themselves. Most people think of traps as static devices, waiting passively for their prey to stumble into them. But the most effective traps are dynamic, evolving entities that adapt to their environment and their target. Andrew believed he had walked into a simple snare, a straightforward case of stolen intellectual property that could be resolved through legal action. What he failed to grasp was that he had entered a living organism, a complex ecosystem of consequences that would grow and change with every decision he made. The beauty of my design lay in its multi-layered approach. On the surface, it appeared to be a conventional corporate drama. Ambitious boss steals subordinate's idea, gets caught, faces repercussions. But beneath this familiar narrative ran deeper currents of technological innovation, psychological insight, and strategic foresight. Every feature Andrew implemented in Netlink, every enhancement he claimed as his own, served multiple purposes in my grand design. Some strengthened the legal case against him, others created vulnerabilities in his system that Project Echo could exploit, still others collected data that would prove invaluable in demonstrating the superiority of my approach. What Andrew mistook for his masterstroke, the public launch of Netlink, was actually the trigger for Phase 3 of my plan. As users flocked to his platform, they were unknowingly participating in the largest controlled experiment in professional networking history. Their interactions, preferences, and feedback patterns were being analyzed not just by Netlink's algorithms, but by Project Echo's sophisticated monitoring systems. Every bug report, every feature request, every customer support ticket contributed to a growing database of evidence that would eventually demonstrate the critical flaws in Andrew's approach. The trap's most ingenious feature was its self-reinforcing nature. The more successful Netlink became, the more resources Andrew devoted to its expansion. The more he expanded, the more he relied on the very infrastructure that contained the seeds of his destruction. Venture capital flowed in, partnerships materialized, media attention intensified, all serving to amplify the impact when Project Echo finally revealed itself. Each new hire he made, each market he entered, each award he accepted only tightened the complex web of dependencies that tied him to the fate I had orchestrated. Even the corporate culture Andrew had cultivated worked against him. His management style, characterized by intimidation and credit-taking, had created a workforce primed to embrace change. When the time came, these same employees would prove remarkably receptive to Project Echo's alternative vision of leadership and innovation. The very environment that had enabled his rise would become the catalyst for his fall, as disillusioned team members recognized the opportunity to align themselves with a more ethical and sustainable future. The temporal aspect of the trap was equally sophisticated. Time was both my ally and my weapon. While Andrew rushed to capitalize on his ill-gotten gains, I operated on a different timeline altogether. Each delay in his product rollout, each iteration of his platform, bought me precious months to refine Project Echo and strengthen my position. The corporate world's obsession with immediate results worked perfectly in my favor, as Andrew's need for quick wins prevented him from properly vetting the technology he had stolen. Most importantly, the trap was designed to evolve beyond its initial purpose. What began as a response to personal betrayal had transformed into something far greater, a mechanism for systemic change in how technology companies approached innovation and ethics. The documentation I had gathered, the alliances I had formed, the technological breakthroughs I had achieved, all these elements would serve not just to bring down Andrew Caldwell, but to redefine industry standards and practices. The trap wasn't just catching a thief, it was reshaping an entire ecosystem. As I monitored the situation from my position within Caldwell Enterprises, I marveled at how seamlessly each component of my design integrated with the others. The legal framework, the technological infrastructure, the psychological insights, the strategic alliances, all worked in perfect harmony to create a trap that was as beautiful as it was deadly. Andrew walked through his days believing he was building an empire, when in reality he was constructing his own labyrinth, brick by carefully placed brick. The office atmosphere had shifted subtly in recent weeks, though most employees couldn't quite put their finger on why. Rumors circulated about upcoming product launches, potential mergers, and possible restructuring. Andrew moved through these currents like a shark sensing blood in the water, his movements becoming increasingly erratic as pressure mounted from all sides. What he interpreted as normal business challenges were, in fact, the first gentle tremors preceding the earthquake I had engineered. From my vantage point as both insider and outsider, I watched as various factions within Caldwell Enterprises began to align themselves according to predictable patterns. The old guard clung desperately to their positions, terrified of change but sensing its inevitability. Younger employees, frustrated by years of Andrew's authoritarian management style, started forming informal networks of resistance. Even among Andrew's inner circle, cracks began to appear as trusted lieutenants questioned the sustainability of his rapid expansion strategy. These developments weren't accidental, they were carefully orchestrated components of my larger plan. Through strategically timed leaks and well-placed information, I had been manipulating the company's internal dynamics for months. Each department head who suddenly discovered discrepancies in Netlink's development timeline, each middle manager who noticed similarities between Andrew's public statements and my original presentations, each junior developer who stumbled upon archived versions of ConnectFlow's prototype, all were pieces moving across a board only I could see. The media landscape proved particularly fertile ground for my machinations. Industry publications that had once fawned over Andrew's supposed genius now published skeptical articles questioning the originality of Netlink's features. Tech bloggers, armed with carefully curated documents I had released through anonymous channels, began dissecting the platform's architecture and finding curious parallels with academic research I had conducted years earlier. Venture capitalists who had initially lined up to invest started asking uncomfortable questions about intellectual property rights and innovation provenance. Meanwhile, Project Echo's development proceeded apace in secret locations scattered across the city. I had assembled a team of brilliant minds, disillusioned Caldwell Enterprises employees, independent developers, and academic researchers, all united by a shared vision of ethical technological advancement. Together, we refined the platform's capabilities, incorporating feedback from beta testers and strengthening its security protocols. The contrast between Netlink's increasingly unstable infrastructure and Project Echo's robust architecture grew more pronounced with each passing day. Andrew's response to these mounting pressures was textbook crisis mismanagement. Rather than addressing concerns directly, he doubled down on aggressive marketing campaigns and high-profile partnerships. Each new announcement created additional vulnerabilities in Netlink's position, as partners demanded more transparency and customers grew wary of investing in a potentially compromised platform. His attempts to silence critics through legal threats only drew more attention to the allegations against him, creating a feedback loop of negative publicity. The most fascinating aspect of this unfolding drama was how it exposed the fundamental flaws in Caldwell Enterprises' corporate culture. Years of operating under Andrew's results at any cost philosophy had left the organization woefully unprepared to handle genuine innovation or ethical challenges. Departmental silos prevented effective communication, fear-based management stifled creative problem-solving, and a lack of proper documentation made it nearly impossible to trace decision-making processes. These weaknesses, which I had identified early in my tenure, now worked perfectly in service of my plan. As I navigated these turbulent waters, I found myself appreciating the complexity of human behavior within corporate environments. People reacted to uncertainty in predictable yet fascinating ways. Some sought safety in numbers, forming protective clusters around particular managers or departments. Others embraced chaos, seeing opportunity in disruption. A few attempted to maintain neutrality, hoping to emerge unscathed regardless of outcome. Each reaction created ripples that affected others, generating patterns of behavior that I could anticipate and influence. The situation reached a critical juncture when several major clients began requesting detailed audits of Netlink's development process. These requests, ostensibly routine, carried significant implications given the mounting questions about the platform's origins. Andrew's attempts to deflect these inquiries through charm and obfuscation only raised more red flags, prompting additional scrutiny from regulatory bodies and industry watchdogs. What had started as a trickle of concern was rapidly becoming a torrent of investigation. Throughout this period, I maintained my facade of loyal employee while quietly accelerating Project Echo's deployment timeline. The prototype device on my desk had multiplied into dozens of units, each representing a node in a growing network of change. Beta testers reported overwhelmingly positive experiences, noting how Project Echo's emphasis on genuine connection and ethical use of data created fundamentally different user interactions compared to Netlink's transactional approach. These reports, combined with the mounting evidence against Andrew, suggested that the final phase of my plan was approaching sooner than anticipated. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Andrew had believed he was walking into a simple opportunity, stealing an idea and claiming it as his own. Instead, he had stepped into a masterfully constructed ecosystem of consequences that mirrored the very technology he thought he controlled. Just as ConnectFlow's original design had intended to map and enhance human connections, my trap had created an intricate web of relationships, dependencies, and outcomes that would soon reshape everything he thought he knew about power, innovation, and success. As the pieces continued to fall into place, I found myself reflecting on the nature of control in corporate environments. Andrew had always believed that power came from domination, from controlling information, manipulating perceptions, and dictating outcomes. What he failed to understand was that true control came from understanding and shaping the flows of influence, from recognizing patterns and guiding them toward desired outcomes. The trap he had walked into wasn't about force or coercion, it was about creating conditions where the natural course of events would lead inevitably to transformation. Every morning, as I entered Coldwell Enterprises' sleek headquarters, I carried with me the knowledge that I was participating in something far greater than a simple act of revenge. The careful documentation I had maintained, the strategic alliances I had forged, the technological advancements I had developed, all these elements were converging toward a moment of profound change. Andrew's empire, built on stolen foundations and maintained through fear, was about to encounter the full force of an idea whose time had come. The anticipation of what was to come filled me with a complex mixture of emotions. Satisfaction, certainly, at seeing my plans unfold with such precision. Excitement, as I watched the various threads of my design weave together into an intricate tapestry of consequence. But also a deep sense of responsibility, for I understood that the outcome of this confrontation would extend far beyond the walls of Coldwell Enterprises. The tech industry, indeed the entire corporate world, was about to witness a demonstration of how innovation, when coupled with integrity and strategic foresight, could transform not just individual careers, but entire ecosystems.